Welcome to today's video on basic biochemistry. Before you learn about biology, there are some basic chemical properties that need to be known, which will be covered in this video. 5 topics are going to be covered in this video, including atomic structure, type of bonds, water and its properties, dehydration, synthesis, and hydrolysis, and lastly, pH. Atoms make up all materials, and you should know about the parts of an atom because they play a huge part in many biological processes. 3 parts of an atom are the proton, electron, and neutron. The center of an atom is called the nucleus, and it is made up of protons and neutrons. The proton has a positive charge and is found in the nucleus of the atom, and it has insignificant weight. The neutron has no charge and is also found in the nucleus, and it makes up most of the mass of an atom. Orbiting the atom is called the electron, and it has a negative charge and orbits the nucleus, and also has insignificant weight like the proton. The amount of protons determine what kind of atom it is, and if the amount of protons and electrons are equal, then the atom is relatively stable. There are 4 main types of bonds that are involved in biology, and they include ionic bonds, covalent bonds, nonpolar bonds, and polar bonds. Ionic bonds result from the transfer of electrons, and an atom that gains an electron is called a cation, while an atom that loses an electron is called an anion. As you can see in the picture above, an electron is being transferred from the atom on the left to the atom on the right. Next type of bond is called a covalent bond, and that is formed when atoms share electrons, and the result is called a molecule. As you can see on the picture on the left, the atoms are between hydrogen and carbon are being shared. There are 2 other types of bonds involved in biology, and that includes nonpolar bonds and polar bonds. The difference between the 2 is that nonpolar bonds share electrons equally between 2 identical atoms, while polar bonds share unequal atoms. As you can see in the blue picture, the polar atom is uneven because it has 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen, while the nonpolar bond is split evenly with 1 hydrogen on the left and 1 hydrogen on the right. Water is a very important molecule, and many processes rely on its structure. First of all, water is polar. That means there is a slightly negative and slightly positive side because oxygen has a stronger electronegativity. Water forms hydrogen bonds, and this is responsible for water's special characteristics. Water has 5 different properties, and the first one is that it has a high specific heat, and specific heat means how much energy is required to raise the temperature by 1 degree Celsius. And if it has a high specific heat, that means it has a high resistance to temperature change. The second property is that water has a high heat of vaporization, and that means that it requires a great amount of heat to evaporate it. And evaporation is when liquid water transforms to gas due to a higher temperature. Since water is polar, it is a universal solvent to all polar objects, and that means that it can be a solvent to many different solutes. Fourth is that water has a high cohesion tension, and that means that it is highly attracted to other water molecules rather than others. Lastly, ice is less dense than water, and if it's less dense, then it will definitely float on liquid water, which is more dense than solid. An example of ice on water affecting biological processes include in wintertime when fish are in liquid water, so it is underneath the ice and is able to maintain its temperature. Molecules by themselves can't do much, so they are combined using dehydration synthesis. And dehydration synthesis is the action that causes monomers to form into polymers. The way this happens is by the removal of 1 hydroxide ion from 1 monomer and the removal of a hydrogen ion from the other at the site of bond formation. This causes the removal of a water molecule, and that's why it has dehydration in the name. The opposite of this is called hydrolysis, and that is the action that results in the separation of polymers into monomers. Monomers are released by the addition of water molecules, adding hydroxide to one monomer and hydrogen to the other monomer. The last major component in biochemistry is pH, or the measure of acidity in a solution. Acidity is measured from 0 to 14, and anything with a pH less than 7 is determined as an acid, and anything with a pH over 7 is determined as an alkaline or base. A pH of 7 indicates that the solution is neutral, and one of the only solutions that are neutral is water. pH is determined by the concentration of hydrogen in a solution, and a higher concentration indicates a higher acidity, while a lower concentration of hydrogen indicates more basic solutions. The reason that pH is so important in living organisms is that they can't function with the high change in acidity because it alters the structure and therefore it can't do its job. If you don't understand acidity, you can take a look at the chart on the right, and you can see that the stronger acids are lower, while the stronger bases are on the top, near the higher numbers. You might have heard me talk about acids and bases, and the difference between the two is that acids can interact with metals and they are also watery, while bases cannot react with metals and they feel really slippery rather than acids. So that basically covers up basic biochemistry, and if you have any questions, leave it down in the comment section. Tomorrow's topic will be the 4 biological macromolecules that are involved in cellular processes. Thanks for watching and have a great day.